Hello, I'm Attakk. Let's talk about the music editor in TIC-80. Now, two warnings for this video. Firstly, this is going to be another bleepy bloopy loud video, so keep the volume on your headphones to a modest level so you don't destroy your eardrums, but I will try to manage the volumes in editing. And secondly, when using the music editor, the instrument that you use to play your music is created in the sound effects editor. So maybe hop to the previous video and watch that one so that you know how to create sounds that you can then use in the music editor. Okay, with that out of the way, here's a fresh copy of TIC-80. Press escape to open our editors. And then this button over here, F5, is our music editor. Now this looks super intimidating, but I'll try to go through everything one step at a time and try to make it make sense. Over here you select which track you're working on. TIC-80 allows for 8 tracks. Over here is tempo and speed. They work together. I'm not 100% sure on what exactly these mean, but tempo is not beats per minute. Tempo is an arbitrary number which is then divided by speed. So this number works in reverse. The higher the number, the slower the song. If you do want to work out the BPM of a song, tempo divide by speed times 3. And that'll be a ballpark. It's not 100%. It might differ by a couple of BPM. But if you're, for instance, making a chiptune version of a popular song and you want them to play at the same time, you can work out that initial value on here and then play around with increasing this and decreasing this or vice versa to get the number of notes that you need to make the song that you want. Rows is how many rows of notes you have in each pattern. Okay, now the slightly tricky part, the levels within levels within levels. Each track has a set of frames. They play top down. I think there's 16 of them. They play top down. And for each of the 4 audio channels, it'll play the pattern that's listed in there. The pattern number is arbitrary as long as you know which is which, but the pattern is the thing that has the notes in it that are being played. TIC-80 is locked on 4/4. Beats go 0, then 4, then 8, then 12. 4 notes per beat. And then each note in your pattern has the note, the octave that note is set on. Keep an eye on the tooltip down here. So this is D sharp. It's playing an octave 4 and it's using sound effect 0 as its instrument. This is why I said it's important to understand how the sound effects editor works, because let me quickly pop back to that. This is index 0 with its standard square wave set to full volume. That's the instrument we're using to play this note. So if you've been working on your game for a while and writing sound effects for it, then you might accidentally use your coin pickup sound to play music. What I generally suggest is that you start at the back with sound effect number 63, use this as your main instrument, and then work back to create your instrument so that your sound effects run from 0 upwards and your music instruments run from 63 downwards. The note that's indicated at the bottom here for the sound effect is the sound it'll play in game. If you trigger the sound effect, this is replaced by the note that you select up here. Changing the little red indicator note down here will not change what note it plays at here. You can't pitch shift an entire instrument by doing that. Commands are kind of tricky. I'll go through them in a second once I've explained the piano roll. A note plays for as long as no other note plays on the same instrument. It's a monosynth, so it plays 1 note per channel with whatever instrument you selected. So say we do a little C major scale. Let's do C minor scale. And let's do them on every second note, because that note will go for 2 beats, then this one for 2 beats, then the G for 2 beats, and then this stops at B because that's a full octave. So if we want the root note 1 octave up, we put the root note and then pitch the octave up 1. See there, it's 1 through 8. So that should be a basic C minor scale. Cool. Now we can start faffing with our commands. The first one is master volume. You tick it on to enable it. Each note can have one command set with 2 input parameters, an X and a Y. You don't have to have a note playing to set a command on it, but this command stays in effect until it gets replaced by another master volume command. So master volume gives you an X and a Y, that's left and right channel. See in the tooltip at the bottom it says left is on X, right is on Y. This number goes from 0 to 16, it's hexadecimal. If I want to, for instance, play this root C note slightly left of center, I would do something like have the left channel at full volume and the right channel at 9. You'll hear it plays slightly to the left of center. I think volume isn't specifically logarithmic, but just how dB works, it tends to sound logarithmic, so that should be slightly left from center. Cool, let's make them pop around. So this one, the master volume, but we set it to the right. This one, oops, undo. This one we set master volume to center. So this will be in your left ear, in your right ear, and then just full send. I don't know if that's obvious. Let's make it a bit more extreme. Let's do it again. And as before, this last note will keep playing and the master volume will keep this value until we set another channel that stops it. Okay, that should pop between your ears left and right. Besides putting a note in a thing and it being blank to sustain whatever is set before, if you right click on something, it makes a row of little red dots. This is a note stop. When it hits this bar, whatever notes were playing will just stop. So after this, oh, it remembers what octave you were busy programming in, so that you don't have to, if you decide to play an octave 6, you don't have to change all of them. Okay, that's how master volume works. I'm going to turn these off for now. Next up is chord. So chord has 2 inputs, and that's the 2 complementary notes that get played. This is going to make those TV game sounds where the system quickly arpeggiates through 3 notes because it's a monosynth, so it can only play 1 note at a time. But this arpeggiates through the notes quickly to create a chord type of sound like the NES used to do. So we're playing in a minor, so for a minor we want the comps of the 3rd order and the 7th order. These are in semitones. 3 semitones up is this note, 7 semitones up is this note, which is going to get weird by the time it hits these. So what I would do is on this note, I would set chord and set them to 2 zeros just to clear that order. So the first note will have our chord playing and then it'll go away for the next one, which still sounds a little jarring, but it demonstrates the effect. If I didn't set this, it would just use those chords for all future notes. That effect does carry on, so our note stop does not stop commands. Next up is jump. For jump to work, I need to be a little further down. Be very careful with this command because your music is going to play in weird freakish orders because you accidentally turned one of these on somewhere in one of your patterns, because this switches the entire music player to a different place. Try to use your frames to dictate in what order things play rather than using the jump, but if you are going to make weird modular synthesis, things that repeat in funny ways, this could be useful. The 2 values for X and Y are frame and beat. Frame is here, so you can make it jump to like frame 7, and beat is on the bars, so 0, 4, 8, 12, which would be 0, 1, 2, 3. So let's make this note jump to frame 0, which we're on, but bar 1 would start at this number 4 note. That's how jump works. It's a little scary to actually use in a song. Next up is slide. Let's use the slide for these notes up here. What slide does is it's legato, a glissando, if you know it. Actually, I think a legato is fast and a glissando is slow. It's the same thing. It pitch bends the note from one to the next. So starting this note, we still want to play normally, and from there, starting with this note, we want it to slide. The two values together is a hexadecimal value for how many ticks, in-game ticks, 60 FPS, it takes for the note to slide to the next note over. So let's make this 4 ticks. So now if I play this, it slides between those notes. And it'll keep sliding because I only set that on this note, and these kept sliding until it slides up to the note. So doing this will turn off the effect before this note plays. So you would want to turn off slide either on the first note that you want to play clean or after, and set slide to 0. Next up is pitch, F for pitch, but this is fine pitch. This does, if I go back to the sound effects editor, this does this. It micro tunes the instrument between notes. So if I want this root note here to fine pitch, maybe slightly off key, it starts at 80. Now, hovering over this says X and Y is 128. It's just half of 256 because that's 80 in hexadecimal. So this is the center point. Pitching up from here increases the number, pitching down from here decreases the number. So if I set this to 0, it'll pitch the entire note down, I think a whole tone, or to an arbitrary number. And again, this note keeps this program thing, this pitch stays for all future notes. So things are going to get a little wonky. Let's just do a slight pitch change. It starts at 80, so let's do a 90. That's going to make that note slightly off pitch going up. That's actually pretty extreme. Let's make it a bit more subtle. You'll hear that note is a little off key. I don't use this often, but it can be cool to make interesting effects in a song. Next up is vibrato. This is, held notes. Let's use the last note in our sequence because that note will keep playing and it'll give us time to demonstrate. Vibrato has two numbers. The first one is period, the second one is depth. So how quickly you want the note to vibrato and how far from center the note should vibrato. So if we're doing, say, 6 ticks, that's a tenth of a second, and vibrato by A, which is 10 watts, I'm not sure. I think it's 10 fine pitch indicators. Faff with this number until you get a number you like. Vibratos are not 100% accurate. Even true musicians cannot really vibrato to a particular pitch, and it happens so quickly you're not going to notice. So now we should have our little chord, our arpeggio, and then our scale, and the last note should vibrato on. You see the oscilloscope wobbling from it. Let's make this a little faster. Half. And let's vibrato it a little less. Cool, spooky UFO sounds. And then this last one is delay. This is not delay in the sense of a note repeating like the delay pedal on a keyboard or something. This delays that note by a certain number of ticks. So if I want that note to play 6 ticks late, that'll play at 6 ticks late. There was a pause before the note played. I can make it extreme, put it on 16 ticks. No, what's that value now? 22. So this 16 is 22 in hex. See, that note took a second before it played. And interestingly enough, it missed the slide because the slide initiated to when this note was triggered, and the delay made the actual note come out after the slide was done. Okay, that's what all of those do. Instruments. Let's get back to this quickly. Each individual note can have a different instrument. So let's quickly go to the sound effects editor. This is our square wave at standard. Let's make a sawtooth next to it. I'm just setting sawtooth at max volume just to have another option. This is now 63 and 62. So in our music editor, all of these are still playing on 0. So let's quickly do a 63. This seems laborious. Okay. And now let's play the second part with the other instrument. Okay. Two different instruments, and you can change them on each individual note as it goes. So now I want to start programming a second pattern. Let's make this pattern 1 will just unison the other one, so there's no point doing that. Pattern 2, this can be any number as long as you know what it is. You can set your drums starting at pattern 20 if you want. Let's maybe put some drums in here. So in your sound effects editor, if you have a sound that's just this bottomed out sample, that's the noise channel. Well, it's not a noise channel, but it makes noise. So you can use that for drums. And this is, what did I say, 61. And I want that low. There. Okay, now that we understand what's going on here, oh, I didn't mention it, but if you want to work on a particular sample, now that I actually have 2 channels going, if I want to just listen to my drum track, I can turn off channel 1 down here. These are our mute buttons. And then I can work on this specifically. Why is it playing a note down there? Oh, it's just when I stop it. That happens sometimes. When you stop the sound, a glitchy note happens. But it wouldn't play that way in the game. Okay, last thing. I haven't explained what these do. This is how I'm controlling the music editor and making it play what I want to. This one is to play the track. You press space, it plays the whole track from the first position, the way it would play if you queued the song in game. Play frame means if I'm busy editing, say for instance I'm way down here on this frame and I'm working on whatever sound effects I'm working on, if I press enter, it'll play from here, not from the beginning of the song. That's this play frame pause kind of icon as opposed to the play icon or pause play icon. Next up is shift enter, which plays from the current note. That doesn't really work in the piano roll because you don't actually have a selected note. It'll make more sense when we get to the tracker in a second. This sustains notes between frames. Normally notes are sustained between notes and it keeps going until it hits 63, and then when it switches to the next frame the notes start over. Turning that on will make the note that last played on here sustain over into the next frame, which can create some interesting effects, but can also be a little confusing. On the other hand, you may not want to have to put the note again in the next frame and have that jarring effect of the note playing from its initial note again. So that little setting does that. I don't know if this setting is cartridge wide or whether you have to pass it in code or whether it's a preview only thing. I've not experimented enough with the music editor to distinguish those differences. And then I'm skipping a button. I'll be back to that in a second. This is loop. Generally, when you program music in TIC-80, you're programming it to be background music, so it will loop. And when you cue a song in code, there's a variable you can pass that tells it whether it should loop or not. This turns it on in the editor, or turns it off in the editor. If it's off like it is now, it'll play to the end and stop. If you turn this on, it'll play to the end and then pop back to frame 0 and loop again. So if you have background music, you would want it to loop. So when you're writing the music, you would want it to loop. If you're playing like a game over do-do-do-do kind of a sound, then you would want to write it without the loop on. And then when you cue it in game, you would cue it with loop false. Okay, the button I skipped is follow mode. So if this sample is playing, let's just get back to here. If this is playing, see the play head, the play position scrolled out of screen. And it doesn't follow it. If you turn this on, it sticks to that play head. So you can see where your song is going. Okay, now that we understand what's going on here, now let's start over. This is tracker view. You can find it by clicking on the tracker mode button over there, or piano mode, or if you click the music editor again, it switches between them, or F5 switches between them. This is more of a traditional tracker view that you would have on a step sequencer. So this is frame 0 for track 0. the 4 audio channels. This is pattern number 1, pattern number 2, and then the note that is playing on each thing. So the same as we have on here, we have C playing on octave 4. So over here it's indicated as C natural octave 4. And then the 63 is the instrument. It's yellow because yellow 63. And then this is the command, the single digit. There's a slide with its X and Y values indicated next to it. And this one has keyboard controls. So I can program notes. I'm just going to create a new pattern quickly, somewhere in 5. Your keyboard, the bottom half of your QWERTY keyboard, maps to the piano roll like you had in the sound effects editor. I'll pop up the little display. So I can program notes by going, oh, right, we wanted sound effect 63. These I use the keypad for, if your keyboard has a keypad. Otherwise, number row works as well. Program the notes. I haven't found a way to switch the octave in code, but clicking on it and then typing a different number changes the octave. In this case, it plays the note that you're programming, the same as if you were programming notes in here, but then pressing space plays the whole song. This is going to sound terrible. Hey, it's not actually that bad, except there's a held note somewhere. This note is being held. Let me just quickly, these are the mute buttons that we had for the other channels. Yeah. So this will be our baseline. As an example. And then commands work the same way. Click on the thing, type for instance if I want master volume M, and I want master volume to be 6 and 9. And you can just work your way through this and quickly edit things. Pressing delete deletes the whole number. Pressing 0 on a thing clears that particular value. Okay. That's how you would program songs in here. That's the explanation part done. Let's quickly handle how we play a song in code. We're using the music command. The music command takes a track number, so we were working on track 0. A frame number, in this case it was frame 0. Then on which row to start, not beat, row. So one, as they're numbered in the whatever row, the particular row. I think this is actually easier to see here. That row number there. 0 in our case, and then the last value is the loop, which defaults to true. So background music would just play. If you're playing in a game over sting or something that you only want to play once, false is fire and forget. It'll play until it's done and stop. Okay, these values default to an innocuous -1, which is music you can't play. So if at any point in your game you just want the music to stop, do that. Like if you're resetting your game or whatever, just pass it an empty music call, and whatever music is playing will immediately stop. Now it's worth mentioning, and I mentioned this in the sound effects thing as well, do not put this music call inside a loop that happens on your TIC call, like this, because it will play only the first note of the first frame of whatever track you select on the same tick, every tick, just the one note, which sounds broken. Let me demonstrate. How are your ears feeling? Because mine feel terrible. So just moving this call to a function that executes once and doesn't get looped allows the music to then play the way we wrote it. Mine wouldn't play because I'm cancelling the music right after. So let me just take that out quick. Now our crappy song is playing in its entirety. Let me show you what this looks like if you actually know what you're doing. If you just want an example of what it looks like if somebody can actually write music, then create an empty folder and then run the demo command in TIC-80. That'll pull down a bunch of files. I'm not sure if these are downloaded or if they're embedded inside TIC-80 when you download it. but that's the file we're interested in. It's called music.tic. So we can destroy that piece of nonsense we wrote. Let's look at this. So this is our sound effects editor. You'll see that they've created custom waveforms on each of these waves. I'm not going to click because it's going to reset all this stuff. But this is done on a level that I cannot compete with. I have very little understand. I understand what's going on here in concept, but I would not be able to execute this. That kind of synth waveform thing is alien to me. And then this is not a game. This is just a blank cartridge that says press start to rich, whatever that means. And then there's a little dancey man just to have something on screen. So their instruments are written in the first few indexes. Like I said earlier, I would normally park these at the back here so that when I start creating sound effects, or if I already had sound effects in my game, they don't get in each other's way. And now this is how the song is structured. So let's start with, this is track 0. There is only one track in this. Frame 0 plays pattern 1 and pattern 2 until it's done. Then again pattern 1 and pattern 2. On the third frame, frame number 2, it introduces 2 other instruments. Now I'll have to bump the sound for this a little bit in post because this is way quieter than we were editing before. But let's quickly play through this. And then it stops because loop isn't on. But in game you would probably have this loop turned on so that that would just keep going. And there's 16 frames in here, so you can program this to play a lot more sophisticated parts coming in and going out before it actually loops. Now let's look at it one at a time. So for pattern 1, let's mute the other channels so that we can see what's going on. We have this little rhythm programmed. They're creating a delay effect by playing a note after a note. So let's make this super slow for demonstration purposes. So that's how they're creating the delay effect, by playing notes after each other. What was this set to? 6. 5. Okay, that's pattern 1. Pattern 2. This I think is the bass and the drums track. So 2 is the bass note. 2 is our bass. And 6 is our snare. That's actually quite a well done snare. Push. You can obviously copy this snare out of here and put it in your own game if you want to use it. This is what it sounds like. That has a 808 kind of vibe to it. Okay, then when we get to frame 02, we introduce this MIDI line, the lead. But what's interesting about this one is that it has a delay effect on it, not on the note, but the delay effect comes from pattern 4, which you'll notice that if I skip between these two, that note is on the 0. This note is set off by 3 notes because it sounds the same. If played out of context, but if you have both of these on, this happens. Which creates this cool reverb effect because they're playing on 2 different channels, which means the 2 notes are playing at the same time but offset from each other, and they have a slightly different timbre. So it sounds like a delay effect, which is an egregious use of the 4 available audio channels. But this is chiptune. It's not like we have to fit an entire game with sound effects or whatever in here. So why not? Okay. So jam line and bass line together sound like, well, the intro. So like this up here. And then these two together sound like this. Oops. If you're interested, this is what it looks like in tracker mode. So I am on frame 2, which is the first frame that has all 4 sounds. On frame 2, we have pattern 1, pattern 2, pattern 3, and pattern 4. And in this view, you can much easier see how this note is delayed by that note. And there's an octave difference, which I think has to do with how the synth instruments are created. Because if you double the frequency of a note, the octave goes up by 1. That's why on a guitar, if you half the length of the strings, that's an octave up, which is your 12th fret. If you half it again, it's another octave up. Half it again, it's another octave up in length, which means the frequency is doubling. So that's how everything is laid out on here. The tempo of the song is dictated 150 divided by 5. If you want the BPM for that, it's times 3. So 30 times 3 is 90 BPM. I'm not going to check that. So that allows them to program the bass and drum line playing on every note and then space the rest out in between. And that's how you would write a little song in TIC. And then it's just queued up by you pressing a button, and when you press the button, it triggers music track 0. So that is the music editor in TIC-80. I hope this was informative. I hope this inspires you to make your own chiptunes. You can use the export command to export a wave of the song if you do want to use it in a different game. If you just want to use TIC-80 to make a chiptuney kind of soundtrack for a game written in Unity, this can purely be a music creation tool if you want it to be. But that is it. That's the music editor. I believe that's the last video in this series for the time being. Next up we'll start a new tutorial, I think. But let's outro with this song. Just put loop on. Hey, this is actually good.